Humphrey, we're talking about 100,000 deaths a year.
Yes, but cigarette taxes pay for a third of the cost of the National Health Service. We're saving many more lives than we otherwise could because of those smokers who voluntarily lay down their lives for their friends.
Swear to God, it's like every time I push the record button, something happens. Ben wants pancakes. Tammy's texting me. Or, now my headphones aren't working, so I'm not using those. Not that I've been using them anyway, but I wanted to use them tonight, and they're not working. I don't know why. Just this ongoing thing. It just, I don't know, man. I was joking with Josh earlier this evening from the Resistance podcast that he doesn't do anymore, but now he writes, and he was bemoaning the fact that he couldn't write. And I kept saying, if you got time to Facebook, you got time to write. Says the guy that every time he starts to hit record, gets distracted by something else. Now Ben is throwing a ball against the wall. It's always gonna be something, isn't it? I wanted to talk about the Californianization of elections. This is something that has been rattling around in my head for a while, and I just wanted to get it down so that maybe I could start coalescing it into something else. I don't know. When you talk about the Californianization of elections, you're really talking about, well, most people think you're really talking about this idea of Californians moving to new states and voting the wrong way. Arizona, a traditionally blue state, goes blue this past election. And even the Seattle Times runs an article about how Washington State may have helped flip Arizona blue. What do they mean? Well, a bunch of Washingtonians, fed up with the high taxes and ridiculous regulations of the state of Washington and Zero Inslee's idiocy, moved to Arizona. Not a lot, not as many as Californians did, but they did go there, enough so that the Seattle Times can run an article talking about how we helped flip Arizona blue. Of course, the bigger prize on the table was Georgia. Georgia flips blue. Georgia, traditionally Republican state, I guess, in some ways. But it flips blue, and much of that can be attributed to Georgia as one of the top 5 places that Californians are moving to. And even Republican Californians tend to lean, in other places, more Democrat Party than Republican Party. It's just reality, folks. Look, I lived in Georgia for a decade. The Republican Party there is not what it is in California. Never has been. The California Party and the California Republican Party, despite being moribund, is far more willing to put up with nonsense than they would be elsewhere. And so these Republican Californians get into these new places. They're uncomfortable with the actual Republican values and the actual Republican candidates, and so they vote blue. That's one way to look at the Californianization of an election, but I think there's actually something more to it than that, and it comes back to this phrase, Californianization, because that's a takeoff on the phrase the Balkanization of something, which essentially means you're taking the worst of something and throwing it everywhere else, making everywhere else like the Balkans, which, for those of you not up on your history, the Balkans are, well, as Mr. Miller used to call them, they're the powder keg of Europe. Every bad thing that happens in Europe tends to start in the Balkans, or as I think it was Bismarck said, some foolish thing down in the Balkans will kick off another war. Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but there's this mentality that says when you Balkanize something, you're really turning it into something it was never intended to be. Well, when you talk about Californianization of something, you're talking about turning those places into something they weren't intended to be. And while it's easy to look at the movement of people and go, okay, well, that's what's affecting this, that's what's changing this stuff, that's what's making this happen, I think there's something, well, there's a California effect that not very many people know about outside of California. Well, we're starting to see, and I'm starting to see more and more in elections around the country. Back in 2016, there was a ballot proposition in California. Now, California has a ballot proposition system that is out of control. I'm a conservative. I'm going to tell you that the ballot proposition in California is ludicrous. It is insane. It is essentially, as one state legislature once put it, balloting or budgeting by the ballot box. Everybody that can get enough signatures can put something on the ballot to fund something. And the way they write these things, they're locked into it. So it doesn't matter if the state has enough money or not. It doesn't matter if it's a real priority or not. Boom, it comes out of the budget. A wonderful example of this is the high-speed rail system, Prop 1A, back in 2012. I think it was 2012, somewhere in there. Idiotic system, idiotic idea, completely unnecessary, but it's cool. People voted for it. And what do we got all these years later? Nothing. We're never going to have, they don't live there anymore, are never going to have anything to show for it. It's just a boondoggle of political patronage and wasted money. That's all it is. And Californians are still going to be paying for that, even though it'll never actually be completed. You're going to be paying for that for 100, 150 years, easily, because it's a stupid idea. But this ballot initiative process is so out of control that this is how this is happening. And we're starting to see that in other places here in Washington. We're starting to see ballot initiatives become more commonplace and more partisan, which is exactly, they're essentially becoming weaponized and used in that way. Well, back in 2016, there was an idea, there was a ballot proposition number 56, put on the California ballot, to raise taxes, surprise, California, on cigarettes. Now, look, I've said this for years. I will continue to say it. It's probably one of the more controversial things I say. It's one I always get emails from people going, I hate smoking. Hate it. Despise it. Were I king for the day, I guarantee you my first executive order would be to ban all smoking. Sorry, just the way it is. That said, I don't have that power. I don't have that authority. And ultimately, it's up to you. I don't understand why you do it. Really don't. I really don't understand why, if it's so great, you have to hang your cigarette out the window of the car. Why can't you roll up your window? I don't understand those things. I don't understand why you got to throw your butt on the ground. Oh, Dave, I don't do that. Yes, you do. But be that as it may, I don't have the authority or the power to get rid of it. Nor would such a ballot initiative pass. You know it as well as I do. So, like many things that annoy me, suck it up and move on. Well, doesn't mean I can't bitch about it, right? The idea here was we would raise taxes on cigarettes, and because you tax things to de-incentivize things, ta-da, people will smoke less. That was the idea. And, oh, by the way, we'll take all of this money and we'll put it into anti-smoking initiatives. We'll fund this, we'll fund that. And just like the big tobacco settlement nationwide didn't do that because they forgot about something, which is very simply, if people stop smoking, they'll stop paying the tax and you won't have this money that you've already spent. Duh. Anyway, that wasn't even the real issue with it. The real issue with it was we went to bed on election night, and there was a lot of battling over this initiative. This was probably the most heavily contested initiative since Prop 8, the gay marriage ban. It went on and on and on. Anyway, election night came and went, and at the end of election night, Prop 56 was going down hard. I mean, it was going to be defeated. It was in the tank. It was going nowhere. Well, amazingly enough, if you do a little research now, you'll find that Prop 56 did in fact pass. And of course, state agencies have wasted, in a scathing report, according to an auditor, they've wasted the money that they should have gotten from the state. They didn't get $6.3 million that they should have. They didn't use the funds as intended. They received, the Department of Healthcare got $220 million from this to repay student loans of physicians and dentists who work in areas with provider shortage. But they ended up spending it on physicians who didn't work in those areas. And just for good measure, they have no intention of changing that. They have no intention of going back and making these people repay this money that they shouldn't have gotten. $220 million. But Dave, Prop 56 was losing. Yes, it was. And this is one of the things I've noted about the Californianization of the country. Not only are they exporting voters who then say they're one thing but vote another way, not only are they exporting ideas that are questionable, they're turning states into pure democracies by going to this initiative system, but Prop 56 was behind. Going to lose. Next day, well, there's still a lot of votes to count. But wait, aren't those voters the same voters that voted for governor? And in the 2016 election, didn't Jerry Brown win by, or whoever, maybe it was 2014, I don't remember. Anyway, didn't they win by a landslide? How do we know that, but we don't know this? Aren't they on the same ballot? Crickets. You don't get an answer to that. For literally the better part of 10 days, as I recall, every day we would get an update on the count for Prop 56. And every day, Prop 56 would move further and further into the yes column. Further and further into it. And eventually, it ended up winning, I don't know, 55 to 45. It won significantly, 65-40 or something like that. Well, it wouldn't be 65-40. It would be 60-40. It doesn't matter. The point is that in the same election that they knew who won everything else that night, they managed to find a whole bunch of votes for Prop 56, which gave them their tax, which they then proceeded to waste because it never was intended to stop smoking, nor was it intended to fund any of those things. It was intended to be used as political patronage, and ultimately, they're not going to fix it. So even though the people of California said do one thing, the government of California did something completely different and doesn't care. Not only doesn't care, they're still collecting the tax. And oh, by the way, now that they know that they've undercomputed the tax, do you think they're going to go back and you think they're just going to let it stay that way? Hell no. They're going to go raise the taxes again because, well, we didn't raise them enough like we should have under Prop 56. So we have the authority to raise them even more. All on the theory that if we do this, people will stop smoking without ever realizing that then we won't have the $220 million to pay to these doctors and dentists who don't work in the areas that we're needed to, that we were supposed to be encouraging healthcare in. And ta-da! In so many ways, and I realize that governments around the country are corrupt at every level. I've said that many times. But in so many ways, this is the real Californianization effect, isn't it? And whether you... Look, I got in an argument with somebody the other day who was mad at me about the general election. And what do you believe QAnon? No, I don't believe QAnon. But whether you believe it or whether you don't believe it doesn't matter to me. You can't deny that over the past 20 years, we've started to see more and more of this election delay. We've started to see more and more of this inability to give us a result like we used to be able to do. And there's always an excuse. There's always a reason. Oh, this broke, that broke, this isn't working right. We lost these. They got mishandled. There was a lawsuit. But it's remarkable to me that the same ballot, I don't even have it around here anymore because I mailed it in, the same ballot that has all of those things on it, I can get one result, but I can't get all of them? How is that even possible? That, my friends, might be the real Californianization effect. And if we don't get a hold of that pretty soon, it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse and worse.